At 0600 Tokyo time, the US and Japan launch a joint naval airstrike against Chinese ships trying to reinforce the Guanyin landing zone. Japanese F-15Js and US F-35Cs strike a Chinese supply flotilla. At least 5 PLA Navy ships are sunk, including one carrying fuel. Japanese destroyers use Type 12 land attack cruise missiles to hit radar stations in the Taiwan Strait. September 15, 2025, 3 a.m. Beijing time. In an underground command bunker beneath the Western Theater Command in Chengdu, Chinese President Xi Jinping sits at the head of a dimly lit operations room. He's surrounded by generals, naval admirals, and cyber warfare officials. There is no press, no announcement, no room for error. On the main wall, a massive digital map of the Taiwan Strait flickers, dotted with coordinates of naval fleets, missile silos, satellite feeds, and Air Force squadrons. The room is silent, waiting. Xi slowly nods. Begin. By 4 a.m., over 1,000 PLA rocket force missiles are in the air. They aren't just hitting Taiwan. The opening strike spans across Quemoy and Matsu Islands, blasted first to sever forward defense outposts. Penghu Archipelago, a key anti-air and radar base. Hualien and Taitung, where Taiwan's air bases and hardened bunkers hide their F-16Vs. And civilian satellite uplinks and command centers in Taipei intended to blind communication. China's strategy is blitz and confusion. They follow with cyber attacks, flooding Taiwan's power grid, and satellite communications. Space warfare, using co-orbital drones to jam 2 US satellites near geostationary orbit, and microwave strikes, likely from land-based platforms, against early warning radars. At the same time, Chinese Navy submarines silently move into the Bashi Channel and Miyako Strait, preparing to complete a full maritime encirclement. 4:50 p.m., PLA Air Force scrambles J-20 stealth fighters and J-16 multi-role jets from Fujian and Guangdong bases, but they aren't heading directly for Taipei yet. Instead, they sweep south toward Kaohsiung, Taiwan's southern industrial heart, and north toward Taoyuan International Airport, crippling logistics before they can be used to ferry reinforcements. Hundreds of drones are released from container ship launchers hidden in plain sight in the South China Sea. These swarms are equipped with reconnaissance optics and kamikaze AI targeting small air defense radars. This is China's test of its ghost cloud doctrine, autonomous first strike saturation before committing troops. President Lai Ching-te, barely 8 months into office after the January 2025 elections, is woken at 5:12 a.m. His National Security Council has already moved underground. Their first act, activating the Thunderbolt protocol. This includes launching dozens of Skybow 3 interceptors from hidden batteries in the mountains, deploying NCSIST, developed sea drones to begin anti-ship defense in key harbors, shutting down Taiwan's deepwater ports to prevent amphibious landing attempts. Despite the early warning time, the scale of destruction is overwhelming. Entire towns near Taichung and Penghu are blacked out. Still, Taiwan's indigenous mobile missile launchers, armed with Yunfeng cruise missiles, retaliate. They hit radar and air bases in Fujian and Zhejiang. Some missiles even reach as far as Ningbo Naval Command HQ. In Washington, D.C., it's 5 p.m. on September 14th. President Trump is rushed to the Situation Room. Flash reports from U.S. Pacific Command confirm hundreds of strikes on Taiwan. Satellite feeds show massive missile arcs from China, but no U.S. ships have been hit yet. The White House releases a statement calling China's move a full-scale act of war, but U.S. forces have not yet engaged. Congress is split. Japan and Australia are called into emergency meetings. But one thing is clear, the war has begun. The Eastern Theater Command of the PLA Navy moves into final formation. 3 Chinese naval groups, including the Shandong and Fujian aircraft carriers, sail across the Davis Line, the unofficial maritime boundary in the Taiwan Strait. Simultaneously, Chinese submarines begin surfacing west of Luzon and east of Yonaguni, positioning to deter U.S. and Japanese naval entry into the conflict. The blockade has begun. By 7 a.m., Taiwan is now entirely surrounded by a ring of over 80 warships, 14 submarines, hundreds of Type 02, 2 fast attack boats, dozens of maritime drones disguised as cargo buoys. In Taipei, videos begin to leak through Starlink backup terminals, showing entire districts in darkness, explosions on the horizon, and Taiwanese citizens retreating to metro bunkers. By now, 40% of Taiwan's power grid is offline. The main undersea internet cable has been cut near Matsu ports at Keelung and Kaohsiung are smoldering from air-to-surface missile hits. China hasn't landed troops, but they've started the siege. Chinese state media declares, Taiwan reunification operation underway. Xi Jinping appears briefly in military fatigues on CCTV. We seek reunification, not occupation. We strike only those who provoke war. But the message is clear. This isn't a skirmish. This is conquest. Meanwhile, social media bots flood global platforms, blaming Taiwan for escalating separatist aggression and accusing the US of provoking war by arming illegal rebel territory. Russian and Iranian state channels echo China's message. The information war is now global. China begins its first amphibious feint at 1100 hours. Civilian-style ferries, loaded with assault marines, are sent toward Guanyin Beach, northwest of Taipei. At the same time, airborne drones drop anti-landing nets and jammers along the coast. The true objective? To overload Taiwan's coastal radar and test response timing. Taiwan's Navy opens fire, striking down 3 vessels and damaging a corvette escorting the ferry group. The PLA is testing, not committing, but the first blood is drawn at sea. Back in Washington, the National Security Council faces a split. Hawks demand instant air support and carrier group deployment. Others caution doesn't escalate until U.S. assets are targeted. Trump signs an order to mobilize 2 carrier strike groups from Guam and Yokosuka, not yet into Taiwan waters, but headed toward Luzon and Okinawa for flexible response. The world watches. No shots fired from the U.S. yet, but the clock is ticking. In Tokyo, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida invokes a national security emergency. Japan orders full activation of the Miyako and Nanzi Islands defense garrisons, launch of early warning aircraft, and P-1 sub-hunters toward the East China Sea. Naval repositioning of JS Kaga and Izumo, its helicopter carriers, toward the Bashi Strait. Japan hasn't declared war, but it's unmistakably in defense mode. Privately, Japanese command begins preparing to allow U.S. refueling and strike permissions from Okinawa air bases. By now, Xi is watching closely. The cyber barrage has weakened, but Taiwan's military hasn't collapsed. In fact, F-16Vs are still flying out of hidden mountain hangars. He gives the order, initiate Phase Red. That means launch massive drone swarms toward Taiwan's interior, strike key fuel reserves near Taoyuan and Chiayi, begin precision strikes on Taiwan's remaining radar installations. In the next 60 minutes, over 600 new targets are designated for strike. The next phase has begun. By 1500 local time, fighting still hasn't reached the ground, but Taiwan knows it will. In Taipei, underground bunkers begin organizing civilian resistance units, drawing from Taiwan's 18-month mandatory service system. Over 20,000 volunteers flood local shelters, ready to be armed. Urban combat manuals are distributed. Military staff plan choke points at every bridge and highway. This will be a siege, and Taiwan is digging in. At 1600 hours, for the first time in 12 hours, the skies above Taiwan fall eerily quiet. The barrage of Chinese missiles has slowed. The drone swarms retreat westward, and PLA air patrols temporarily pull back. But no one in Taiwan is celebrating. Military intelligence identifies a new wave of Chinese Type 071 amphibious transport docks, flanked by civilian ferry convoys, moving east from Pingtan and Xiamen toward Guanyin Beach and Tainan. Beijing's intent is now crystal clear. Phase 3 has begun, the ground invasion. By 1700 hours, Taiwan's military implements Operation Iron Shore, a defense plan drawn from years of war games and drills. Key coastal areas, including Guanyin, Tainan, Lukang, and Taichung, are transformed into kill zones. Anti-tank missile crews embed themselves in civilian buildings. Sea mines planted over the last 24 hours are activated via tethered buoys. Concrete barriers and dragon's teeth are deployed across likely landing roads. Taiwan's command knows they can't stop the landings entirely, but they can make them costly. At 1830, Chinese warships begin long-range shelling of Taiwan's west coast. It's not precise, it's psychological. Civilian neighborhoods are rocked by explosions as Type 05 2D destroyers unleash guided artillery near the Guanyin coastline. Meanwhile, Over 100 landing vessels approach in waves, shielded by decoy drones mimicking heat signatures of combat vehicles. It's D-Day, 2025 style, but with satellites and swarm tech. By 1900 hours, the first wave of PLA Marines hits Guanyin Beach. The approach is brutal. Shallow waters filled with anti-landing spikes trap dozens of transport craft. Taiwanese mobile launchers fire Xiongfeng 3 missiles into the chaos. Bayraktar TB-2 drones, purchased quietly from Turkey in 2024, circle overhead and pick off supply barges. But some Chinese units make it through. Hundreds of troops rush the beach, taking cover behind landing debris. The beach is a meat grinder, but a foothold is forming. As Guanyin rages, China launches a second surprise landing in the south, near Tainan. This one avoids the obvious beaches. Instead, shallow draft ferries deploy inflatable boats to remote coves south of the city. These troops are special operations units. Their job, take out infrastructure, cut off roads, and create chaos before Taiwan can reinforce the front. Within an hour, they've severed the number 17 highway and attacked a key power relay substation. At 2100 hours, Japan issues its most serious military alert since World War II. Prime Minister Kishida invokes Collective Self-Defense Law Article 95.1, citing direct threat to regional peace. Japanese forces deploy anti-ship missiles to Yonaguni Island, launch Kawasaki P-1 surveillance planes to monitor the Bashi Strait, greenlight U.S. air operations from Okinawa. Publicly, Japan claims it's still monitoring. Privately, its destroyers are now locked onto Chinese warships. In the north, surviving PLA units push off Guanyin Beach and reach the outer Taipei suburbs by midnight. They encounter not tanks, but trap-laced intersections, empty buses rigged with explosives, and snipers using thermal cloaking from rooftops. Taiwan's 18-month conscripts, once underestimated, are now fighting street to street in Lingkou and Luzhou. It is chaos, no clear front line. Taiwan's defenders are bleeding, but so are the invaders. 3 a.m. Guam time. The U.S. Navy's USS Ronald Reagan Strike Group launches EA-18G, Growler jamming aircraft, and F-35s from the Philippine Sea. Target, Chinese radar and missile positions near Penghu and Pingtan. This marks the first direct U.S. strike on PLA positions. Chinese destroyers retaliate, launching DF-21D anti-ship missiles toward the region. U.S. Aegis cruisers intercept some, others miss entirely. The war is now officially U.S. versus China. As the fighting spreads, a new front opens. The economic war. Taiwan's TSMC fabs in Hsinchu and Tainan are shut down and evacuated. China doesn't strike them. They want them intact. But Taiwan activates its final contingency, Project Phoenix. Technicians begin destroying critical chip-making equipment using thermite charges. The world's most advanced lithography machines are lost, and with them, China's hopes of capturing TSMC intact. Global stock markets tank overnight. At 0600 Tokyo time, the US and Japan launch a joint naval airstrike against Chinese ships trying to reinforce the Guanyin landing zone. Japanese F-15Js and US F-35Cs strike a Chinese supply flotilla. At least 5 PLA Navy ships are sunk, including one carrying fuel. Japanese destroyers use Type 12 land attack cruise missiles to hit radar stations in the Taiwan Strait. China loses hundreds of troops and tons of logistics supplies in a single hour. Inside Zhongnanhai, Xi Jinping is briefed at dawn. The update is grim. TSMC is gone. US is fully involved. Japan is moving toward war footing. Taiwan's cities are turning into anti-PLA fortresses. PLA losses are mounting. Nearly 12,000 Chinese soldiers are already dead or wounded. But Xi doesn't blink. He orders full escalation. Cyber attacks on US mainland infrastructure begin. California's power grid faces rolling blackouts. GPS signals in the Pacific are jammed. The war expands. By midnight in Washington, D.C., Trump addresses the nation. He confirms, the United States is engaged in active combat to defend Taiwan's sovereignty and preserve regional peace. We did not seek war, but we will finish it. Moments later, China launches a barrage of DF-17 hypersonic missiles at U.S. forces on Okinawa and Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. U.S. counter batteries respond with THAAD and SM-3 interceptors. The Pacific is now fully engulfed, and yet Taiwan stands. September 16, 2025, 7 a.m. In northern Taiwan, the war enters a new phase. Chinese forces that landed at Guanyin now push deeper into New Taipei, reaching as far as Banqiao. Their objective is clear: encircle the capital, cut it off from the rest of the island, and force surrender. But every block they cross brings higher losses. Improvised barricades, IEDs, and armed civilians slow their pace. The Taiwanese military has collapsed into urban guerrilla cells. The entire city has become a battlefield. Meanwhile, PLA units in the south near Tainan have stalled. Supply shortages, long logistics lines, and constant missile strikes from Taiwan's mountain bunkers prevent them from linking up with their northern counterparts. 9:30. The U.S. Pacific Fleet, now supported by ships from Australia and France, launches a multi-axis naval offensive in the Philippine Sea. Tomahawk missiles rain down on Chinese radar and missile installations in Fujian and the Paracel Islands. Stealth B-2 bombers from Guam strike PLA naval bases near Shanghai using standoff munitions. U.S. submarines torpedo 2 Chinese amphibious transports, attempting a second wave towards southern Taiwan. This is no longer a limited conflict. The U.S. is now striking Chinese mainland assets. China's amphibious force has sustained over 40% losses. Troop reinforcements are delayed. Fuel and ammunition are running low across the invasion corridor. In the streets of Taipei, PLA soldiers fight without armored support. Tanks can't traverse the city's narrow alleys, and the few that arrive are ambushed by Molotov cocktails, javelin missiles, and drone-dropped explosives. Many soldiers were trained for fast conquest. Instead, they're trapped in a modern Stalingrad. China retaliates. Massive cyber attacks hit. Power grids in South Korea, stock exchanges in Singapore, hospital networks in California and New York. In Beijing's mind, the war is no longer just over Taiwan. It's a global tech war. But U.S. Cyber Command counters hard, disabling parts of China's Beidou satellite system, delaying GPS signals to Chinese drones and missiles. In the dark, PLA forces in Taiwan begin making friendly fire errors. Confusion spreads, morale plummets. Inside Zhongnanhai, cracks appear. The PLA Navy has lost over 20 surface vessels. Nearly 75,000 troops are dead or wounded. The People's Bank of China reports record capital flight and a 23% drop in foreign reserves. Whispers of failure circulate. Videos of body bags returning to Fujian are leaked. Anonymous messages from soldiers beg for extraction. She remains defiant. But Politburo members begin privately discussing off-ramps. With China's momentum broken, Taiwan's army begins limited counteroffensives in the south. Using rail tunnels, utility corridors, and nighttime drone surveillance, Taiwanese forces cut off several Chinese units near Chiayi and Yunlin. They destroy Chinese fuel convoys, ammo depots, and command trucks, effectively freezing entire battalions in place. The war is no longer about defense. Taiwan is now taking ground back. Oil tankers stop transiting through the South China Sea. Insurance companies refuse to underwrite cargo ships moving within 1,000 kilometers of Taiwan. The result? Global fuel prices triple. Tech companies dependent on TSMC's now destroyed fabs begin layoffs and shutdowns. Nations scramble to shift chip production to India, Germany, and the US, but it will take months, maybe years. The world is in shock. This is the most disruptive war of the 21st century. China attempts one last push into central Taipei. It commits its remaining airborne forces. Elite PLA paratroopers drop behind enemy lines to strike at Taiwan's Central Command Center. They land, they fight, but within 2 hours, they are surrounded by Taiwan's Joint Special Operations Command and armed volunteers. The battle becomes a massacre. By 2000 hours, not a single paratrooper survives extraction. Beijing's final gamble fails. French diplomats initiate quiet negotiations between U.S. and Chinese envoys in Geneva. Key terms discussed: immediate ceasefire. No U.S. troops land in Taiwan. Chinese forces withdraw within 96 hours. Taiwan remains autonomous, but does not declare formal independence. UN monitors oversee Chinese troop withdrawal. A global task force is formed to prevent semiconductor weaponization. China doesn't admit defeat, but it wants out before nuclear bluffing becomes reality. 2300 Beijing time. Xi Jinping holds a closed-door meeting with rocket force generals. DF-41 nuclear ICBMs are moved out of their silos and paraded above ground. State media airs footage of launch systems on standby. But this is theater, not preparation. Xi knows that using a nuke would destroy any chance of political survival. Still, it's enough to rattle nerves in Washington. The Pentagon raises DEFCON to level 2, the highest since 9/11. PLA soldiers begin abandoning checkpoints in Taiwan's central highlands. Some units surrender en masse, waving white cloths, hoping for food and medical aid. The Chinese supply chain has disintegrated. Air superiority is lost. Naval dominance is gone. For the first time in 60 hours, Taiwanese drones fly uncontested over their own airspace. The island survives, scarred but sovereign. Xi appears on national television. The reunification mission is paused. Our forces have achieved strategic objectives. Further military operations are unnecessary. He avoids the word withdrawal, but the message is clear. China pulls back. Taiwan breathes, barely. American C-17 cargo planes, escorted by Japanese fighters, land in Kaohsiung and Hualien, but no troops disembark. Only humanitarian aid, fuel, and mobile comm systems. Trump's administration sticks to the plan, support without occupation. This helps maintain Taiwanese dignity, avoid an escalation spiral with China, and prove that democracy can stand, even without permanent boots on the ground. The last remaining Chinese landing vessel departs from a scorched beach near Taichung, trailed by American satellites and Japanese destroyers. In its wake are 102,000 Chinese casualties, a devastated Taiwan coastline, a global tech recession, a rewritten Pacific Security Doctrine. The war lasts 3 days, but its consequences will reshape the next 3 decades. Taiwan remains free, more united than ever. TSMC is gone, forcing a global rebuild of semiconductor supply chains. US-China relations collapse, ushering in a Cold War deeper than the last. Japan and the Philippines ramp up rearmament. India, quiet throughout, begins replacing China as the global factory. And in Beijing, whispers grow louder about Xi's legacy and whether the Chinese century has already ended before it truly began. Taiwan didn't win by outgunning China. It won by holding long enough. And for now, that was enough.